Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Got £250,000 you want to blow for some political influence? Hello, number 10 Downing Street? Stacey Herbert.
Max Keiser, you were right all along about David Cameron. David Cameron hosted dinners for millionaire donors in Downing Street flat.
Yeah, influence peddling. The thing that Cameron said he was against when he ran for office, and here he is, he's in office, and he and Sarah will host dinner for you, the corrupt business person, for £250,000, and we'll put your agenda right there in the House of Commons, and we'll debate it right there. You can watch your own agenda that's counter to the interests of the general population being discussed by lawmakers on live television. The utter corruption of it live in the House of Commons in full color, multi-camera fraud starring male menopause victim David Cameron right there.
Actually, his wife's name is Samantha. It was Gordon Brown's wife, who is Sarah.
Oh, okay. They're all the same, aren't they? The central casting, kind of maternal-looking, beefy, buffalo waddling, bribe-taking, bakeless non-poops.
Well, Max, they're offering up an independent inquiry, of course, to examine whether he breached Whitehall rules by entertaining donors and whether policy had been influenced improperly.
Another independent inquiry! Yay! You can. Well, of course, they have these every few weeks, don't they?
Yes.
To keep Jon Snow and Jeremy Paxman over something to talk about, to chat about while they're taking, you know, all of their. How many times have they been in number 10, you know, to help shape the policies of the government going forward? Matter of fact, the cover of The Economist magazine shows David Cameron as a concierge at a hotel, presumably just at the beck and call of the British kleptocracy.
Well, let's move on, Max, because we've got lots of headlines here. You know, they're going to spend hundreds of millions of pounds, waste hundreds of millions of pounds to find out that David Cameron actually did not break any rules. But we're going to look at the headlines because all the facts are there for you to determine whether or not billionaires and multimillionaires who are donating money to the likes of Barack Obama and Prime Minister David Cameron, whether or not they're influencing policy. New details emerge on MF Global, but no smoking gun. Apparently, you know, there were some emails going back and forth that have emerged between Edith O'Brien, the former treasurer of MF Global, and John Corzine. But apparently there's no smoking gun because this is a unique weapon in the hands of politically connected, and that their guns don't smoke.
Well, it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, as expressed itself in the financial sphere, so that Corzine can say it's impossible to determine without some doubt that the money was actually here when it was actually there, and you can't occupy a particle and speed at the same time, and I was actually at that location, I didn't know what was happening in this location, and it's impossible to make this determination, therefore I'm innocent by the virtue of a scattergram pictorial representation of my nonsensical existence as the governor and senator and fraudster-in-chief, where money is mine if I say it's coming out of my ears, and I rehypothecate it within an account that's rehypothecated inside the rehypothecation. It doesn't really exist unless I say it exists. What color is it? What day is it? I don't know. I'm John Corzine. I commit a fraud just going tinkle tinkle to the bathroom. I don't know the difference. I'm a freaking crook. Doesn't matter. I don't go to jail. Why? Because I pay Obama money. I pay the people money. I pay Cameron money. Therefore I'm innocent. I'm innocent because I pay the money. That is not at all debated. That's certain. Whether the money is where it says, that's uncertain. But the fact that he uses money and bribes and pays people in the Obama administration bribes, he's a graft, he's a crook, that is certain.
Exactly. So he's just standing his ground, Max. You know, he had directly ordered Edith O'Brien to transfer $200 million to JP Morgan in London, where Tony Blair is the international advisor, of course, for JP Morgan London. Well, Corzine, the former senator and governor of New Jersey, prior to that, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, he ordered this transfer. Now, just basically what happened is Edith O'Brien transferred the money from a segregated client account to the MF Global account and then to JP Morgan, so thus delivering to her boss a plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, made famous by Oliver North during the Iran-Contra scandal. Now we just call it the uncertainty principle of finance.
Well, let's move on to another headline from JP Morgan here. JP Morgan claims #1 for government debt after Jefferson County. So JP Morgan has emerged from the worst financial crisis since the 1930s as the most profitable U.S. bank, has parlayed crisis-era loans to cities and states and a willingness to outbid other firms in local government bond auctions into becoming the top underwriter of municipal debt last year. This is a turnaround, they say, for JP Morgan's municipal bond department, which has been marred by its involvement in two of the biggest scandals in the history of U.S. public finance. A so-called pay-to-play scheme in Jefferson County, Alabama that contributed to the biggest ever U.S. municipal bankruptcy, and a federal probe that uncovered bid rigging of municipal bond investment products.
No, to name two. We can name 20 or 30. It's an assembly line of fraud.
Yes, but I know you're talking to Josh Brown, who wrote Backstage Wall Street, and he talks about the bucket shops of the 1980s and 90s who got put out of business once they were caught defrauding customers. So why is it that just because these are municipalities and so-called sophisticated investors and treasurers, why do they continue to be able to defraud over and over and over and over again?
It's institutionalized fraud. It's the institutionalized market. Whereas a D.H. Blair or a bucket shop on Wall Street is a retail-oriented shop. And if Mrs. Schwartz somewhere in Des Moines calls up her local SEC representative and complains about the broker on Wall Street that defrauded her out of her $5,000 peanut butter money, okay, then that broker's going down. But when an entire municipality has no sewage and people are floating in their own excrement because Jamie Dimon thought he needed another yacht payment, then that's on the institutional's desk and everything's okay there. Just send Cameron more money.
So let's also look at this quote from California Treasurer Bill Lockyer. So he was interviewed about them doing business with JP Morgan. I haven't found an investment bank that hasn't had some problem in the last 3 years. We do business with them all. I think they provide good service. I think they've been highly ethical with us.
Yeah, well, Jamie Dimon is the leper with the most fingers down there at Wall Street. People like doing business with him because of all the stinking whores that rip people off 24/7. He's got the nicest tie.
I think it's, look, the Bernie Madoff investors thought he was defrauding the markets, but they thought he was giving them a cut, so they didn't mind. Here, he's saying, well, you know, they might have defrauded Jefferson County, but those are a bunch of hicks and rednecks down there. We're California. We're one of Jamie Dimon's sort of guys. He's not going to rip us off. They just don't know it. He's saying they've been highly ethical with us, as far as he knows.
Right, because they're on the insider list, the first call list. They feel like we're going to piggyback. We're going to piggyback Jamie Dimon's fraud. We're comfortable with that. But he'll never turn on us because we gave him money under the table, because we give him lots of bribes, because he's a crook. And so he'll never turn on us until he does, and then it's too late.
So let's look at, again, we're looking for evidence of policy shifts thanks to these billionaires and multimillionaires giving politicians money. Trichet warns of nation's behavioral contagion. Jean-Claude Trichet, the former president of the European Central Bank, said last weekend that he is worried that controversial quantitative easing and other non-traditional steps that global central banks have taken since the financial crisis could be here to stay. He said it might all work out, we might be able to unwind all of this, but he said that the extraordinary actions will likely be part of a new permanent regime.
Right, this means that the central banks, central planning, is responsible for all capital allocation. The idea of free market capitalism, according to Trichet, according to central bankers, is no longer applicable because these economies are too screwed up. They need central planners, they need bureaucrats and technocrats to allocate the capital. And how do they allocate the capital? Well, we know that if you're a friend of David Cameron, you give him £250,000 and he'll allocate capital to you. We know that in America, if you give Jamie Dimon some money under the table, he'll allocate some credit to you. How about Barack Obama? You're a good friend of Barack's. Here's some capital and credit for you too.
You know, this goes in line with what I'm saying is that they're influencing policy. So only a week or two ago, the world was shocked about Greg Smith's letter to the New York Times claiming that Goldman Sachs calls its clients Muppets. Well, as soon as he said that, what happens? 2 weeks later, Ben Bernanke delivers more Muppets to you because he's saying he's going to introduce more easing. It's going to be impossible for you to make any money, you Muppet, unless you give Goldman Sachs your money.
He's spiking the punch bowl. as it's called. That's exactly right. The Greg Smith letter got a little bit too close to Goldman Sachs / Federal Reserve Bank. So they're going to flood the room with a lot of cash, which will make a lot of people some short-term gains. And, you know, as we've talked about on this show before, take an IPO, initial public offering like Facebook, for example. Goldman Sachs takes a huge position for $50 billion illegally, by the way. That's non-contested. Now they're going to take it public for $100 billion plus. So all the lawsuits that are going to result from Greg Smith, they'll say, look, don't sue us. We'll put in a guaranteed winner in your account, 100% gain day one, if you drop your charges. That's what an IPO is all about. Having worked on Wall Street, I myself have done that many times. Hello, Mr. Jones, don't sue us here at Paine-Webber or Oppenheimer or Shearson or Lehman, because we'll put this hot IPO in your account and you make instant profits, so drop your lawsuit, okay? Happens every single day. That's the law is written by brokers with hot IPO shares.
So you mentioned the capital allocation. So we see here the age of the shadow bank run. This is from the New York Times, Tyler Cowen. He says the bank run is back. The modern bank run means a rush to withdraw from money market funds, the disappearance of reliable collateral for overnight loans between banks, or the sudden pulling of short-term credit to a troubled financial institution. But these new versions are in some ways still similar to the old. Both reflect the desire to pull money out of an endeavor and to be first out the door, and both can set off a crash. So he says now we have the introduction of the term as country as bank, so your nation becomes the banker of last resort. But also all of these measures, he's saying, are also permanent from the central bank, this permanent quantitative easing, and that the central bank may end up taking over much of the allocation of capital. So here you have Ayn Rand's disciple, Alan Greenspan, with the help of Ronald Reagan, who deregulated the markets in the name of Ayn Rand in order to end communism. And what have we have here?
Communism by financiers. By the way, Ayn Rand famously did take Medicare and Social Security in her later years, so she's a total hypocrite and her philosophy doesn't make any frickin' sense. But what you're saying here is that what these bankers are telling you is that, like in 2008, if they want to, they can push a button and markets stop working completely, because there is no price discovery. There is no free market capitalism. It's just asset allocated by the central banks that are using that privilege to write laws to make it easier for them to become richer and to destroy the economy and to have people on the street who they will characterize as terrorists if anyone objects to the fact that their wealth is being stolen. But by push-button autocracy, this is an evolution in autocracy. You just simply push a button and credit freezes, panic ensues, and Congress will write any law you want to. They did it in 2008 with Hank Paulson, former Goldman Sachs guy. They'll do it in any country now. This is what happened in Greece. It'll happen all over Europe. It happened in Spain. Spain's ready to hit the wall. They'll just hit the button and say, sign off all your assets, or you're going to cut off all your money. So this is push-button autocracy in the 21st century. All right, Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, much more coming away, so stay right there.